Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Fegan, and my goal is to read 40 books in 2021. 40 books may seem like a lot or a little to you, but for me I think that's a pretty reasonable goal. I think I average somewhere between like 30 to 50 books on a given year, so I feel like 40 is a pretty reasonable hope. In this video, I'm gonna take you through, I guess, about half the books I want to read this year. These are 21 books that I either own or that are on my radar that I would like to read this year. So 3 of the first books I want to read this year are One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, and Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. You may be wondering to yourself, why are these books all lumped together? Or you may know this already, but these are all well-regarded books that have well-regarded film adaptations. If you've seen any of my videos before, you might know that I don't just make book videos, I make book videos, music videos, and film videos, and I'm really interested in the intersection of these things. And so I'm kind of curious about that adaptation process, and like, I feel like so often you either get the book is so much better than the movie, or the movie is so much better than the book, but what happens in instances where people like both of them? I'm definitely reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I have actually already seen the film, so I'm probably gonna read the book and then rewatch the film. I have neither seen nor read Gone Girl, so I'm excited about that. And this is the only one I'm iffy about, because I've seen Blade Runner, and from what I gather, it's not a direct adaptation. So if you have any other suggestions besides this, I'm open to reading something else that's more of like a direct adaptation. In an incredibly similar vein, at some point this year, probably throughout the year, I probably won't make this like 1 month of my life, I have The Shining by Stephen King, The Luck of Barry Lyndon by William M. Thackery, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, and then on my handy-dandy index card, I have purchased but have not yet received Paths of Glory by someone and Dream Story also by someone. This is for a Kubrick video, a Stanley Kubrick video. A lot of directors obviously make movies based on things, but I feel like Kubrick, maybe more than anyone else, is known for adapting things. So I have these 4 books. I've done some collection of seeing or reading all of these. I've both read and seen The Shining, but I'm gonna reread and rewatch The Shining. Haven't seen either or read Barry Lyndon, because who in the world has read this book? Read Lolita and loved it. I saw A Clockwork Orange but haven't read it. I have, let's see, I've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, but not read like the 4-page short story it's based on, which I will be reading. I've seen Eyes Wide Shut, but not read Dream Story, and I have not seen or read Paths of Glory. Lord knows that's going to be like an hour-long video, because you're gonna have to watch me reading all of it, talking about the books, talking about the movies, talking about the differences, but I'm so curious about this, so that will be happening hopefully in the year 2021. Then we just have a few books that I've either owned for a while or have recently bought that are just kind of on my radar and that I want to read. The first is The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which you might be wondering about the bookmark that is literally about halfway through the book. I started reading this like in middle to late 2020 and just completely forgot to keep reading it, so I'm probably gonna start this over and actually finish it. I love Fitzgerald. What's it called? Tender as a Night, I think is my favorite of his, and this kind of reminds me of that vaguely because of some of the autobiographical elements. I realize I haven't said synopsises of any of these books, which probably I should be doing. We're not gonna go back on those first few film ones because, again, I'm reading them not because the plots are interesting to me, but because I'm interested in the adaptation process. But for the rest of the books, I will talk about what they're about so that you have some info, some knowledge, some basis besides just a girl talking about nonsense. This book is about a couple in Jazz Age New York. Surprise, surprise, that's what Fitzgerald loves to write about, and that is what this book is about. Up next, we have Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I have wanted to properly read Baldwin for a long time. I think I was supposed to read Go Tell It on the Mountain in the fall of my senior year for a class, and it was just one of those periods of time, like it wasn't even COVID yet, it was just laziness, where I just didn't actually get around to fully reading it. But this one is about a man in 1950s Paris of American expatriates liaisons. What is this accent that's going all over the place? And violence. A young man finds himself caught between desire and conventional morality. We're all just gonna have to forgive me for what just happened there and move on. Up next we have Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion, which I'm only now remembering that we also read Joan Didion in that exact same class, so I'm just kind of repeating that but on my own time. This is set in late 1960s America, and the back of the book does not help me at all about what it's about, but it seems to be more of a portrait of the time than about like any one particular story arc, and that interests me, and I really like her writing, so I'm excited to read this. Up next we have Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I read a Virginia Woolf book pretty much every year because she's my favorite author, and I didn't know what this one was about until literally right now, and it seems amazing. It's about like this story of like an intergenerational soul, not in like a mystical way, but like we start with the story of this 16-year-old boy and end like 300 years later with the story of a 36-year-old woman, and Orlando's journey is an internal one. He is an impulsive poet who learns patience in the matters of the heart, and a woman who knows what it is to be a man. Amazing. My favorite book by her is The Waves, which kind of follows these people through childhood to death, and I think she writes about both childhood and adulthood so brilliantly, and so the notion of getting to read more from her about childhood and adulthood, just very exciting to me. Up next we have The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. This is a very long book, and I have no idea what it's about, but it was gifted to me by a friend, and I've heard like nothing but the best things about this book, so I'll get to this at some point, and that's all you're getting from me. As you can probably tell, I'm kind of an old soul when it comes to reading. I'm not good at reading like current trends and recent releases, so if there's anything that's coming out this year or came out in the past 5 years that you have read that you think I would love, please let me know. But there are two that have been talked about on BookTube and just on the internet that I'm interested in purchasing and reading at some point this year. The first is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, and from what I can gather, this is about a woman who goes into like this drug-induced year of doing nothing. She like takes a break from her life and she seriously does nothing. I've seen incredibly polarizing opinions about this book, but I think it would be interesting to read given all the stuff that's happened this year. Like, I don't think anyone's been resting or relaxing, but this notion of like doing nothing I think is very interesting to me at this current cultural moment. And the other one, I actually don't know when this came out, but I do know that it's just been talked about a lot recently, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know the second I read a book that is like classified as dark academia, I'm going to be all over it. That's like everything I love. I love books about academic places and I love spooky things, so like that's all I want. I know nothing else about this book. I think it might take place at Yale, but I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that this is like the dark academia book, so if I'm gonna get into it, that's probably a good place to start. Next we have 4 poetry books, and I used to write a lot of poetry. I don't really write anymore, and reading poetry has always been weird for me because usually when I sit down to read, I like getting like completely immersed, pretend that the world doesn't exist outside of me. And when you sit down to read poetry, that's like not the mode you should go into it with, at least in my opinion. So really what I just want this year is to give myself some kind of structure in reading poetry, figuring out a way to do it that makes it feel good, because like with a novel I can seriously sit down for like 4 hours and just read all day, but I don't enjoy doing that with poetry because it makes me feel like I don't savor it. So if I can just figure out some way to read poetry in a structured way that's not sitting down for hours, I'll be happy. So first we have The Captain's Verses by Pablo Neruda. He is a brilliant, beautiful poet. I've read some of his other stuff before, and this is a book I picked up at some point somewhere, and I should just get around to reading it. A poet that I've heard talked about so much but I've never actually read any of her stuff is Mary Oliver, and I have this pretty big collection of her stuff. This will certainly take me a long time to read. Maybe I should just like pick it up soon and kind of read it throughout the year, but I really want to see what all the buzz is about. And then we have 2 kind of narrative-y based poetry books, which is something I'm really interested in, like that intersection, yeah, of narrative and poetry, exactly. So first we have Autobiography of Red by Carson. I've known so many people who have read this either for school or for pleasure and have loved it. It literally says it's both a novel and a poem. It's kind of this retelling of a Greek myth told through poetry, and I've heard only amazing things about this. And finally, I started this in the spring but never got around to finishing it, and that is Paterson by William Carlos Williams. First off, the film Paterson by Jim Jarmusch is one of my favorite films of all time, and it's so clear how inspired he was by this book. I mean, like, the main character in that is always reading William Carlos Williams. The main character is a poet, and so I feel like I have to read this. But also, from like the first 10 pages I've read, it is so beautiful, and my boyfriend adores this book, and he is a poet, so I obviously trust his taste in reading poetry. So this is something I really want to dive into this year, and like, this is actually very high up on the priority list. If I don't get to all those, I definitely at least want to get to this. So those have been 20 books, all relatively reasonably sized and content-wise. And then for book 21, I would like to read this year, is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Infinite Jest is probably something you have either read all of and loved, read some of and hated, or have just heard about and made fun of on the internet. Here's my relationship with Infinite Jest. I have read the first 50 pages and genuinely enjoyed them. So many of the people I love this book. I understand why it's like the butt of every joke. It's a behemoth, it's massive, it's insane, it's out there, it's kooky, it's postmodern, and it's wild. And if I read this, I'm going to have to turn it into content because it's gonna take me like a month, maybe a month and a half, and so I'll probably film myself watching this. Nope, film myself reading this. So if you are so blessed, there will be an Infinite Jest reading vlog at some point in this year. But I think I'm gonna love it, that's the thing, and like I'm not even ashamed of that. I feel like there's kind of this hush-hush, if you like Infinite Jest you can't let anyone know because it's seen as this like embarrassing thing to like, but his writing is amazing. That's like undeniable, and so hopefully if I actually have the willpower to do this, I will read this year. So this stuff will probably be all of the books I read this year, plus I'm sure I will do like some YouTube challenges or like some readathons or whatever. I'll do some other stuff, but this is the stuff I would theoretically love to get to this year. If you have any recommendations for me, please let me know. I feel like this is a pretty good encapsulation of my taste. I love classics, I love modernism and postmodernism, and I love poetry. And what are you most excited to read this year? Let me know in the comments. Maybe I've read some of them, maybe I haven't, maybe I'll discover some new things. I love books so much. But yeah, that is all I have for you today, and I will see you guys next time.